welcome to Super Talk Show. It's so great to have you with us.
Hi, Heidi. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us from the United States. And first of all, congratulations on camera again for just getting into Stanford, class of 2027. Congrats.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so to get started, our audience demographic is just high school students for you to know. And so can you start by giving an introduction about yourself?
Yeah, of course. My name is Tina Mai. I am currently a senior in high school. I'm from Southern California, and I'm going to be an incoming freshman at Stanford University. And yeah, I do a lot of work in like business, computer science, and design stuff. But I know Heidi when we were both on a webinar for an international competition, and we met, and it's very good to be on your podcast.
Yeah. So yes, if I can start by asking you some questions. I know I did a lot of research about you just before the talk show. So yeah, to get started, I know you built an application called VAST. So it's for the audience, it's a voice accessible story tech. And I think it won a huge award, and it was in US Capitol building. So can you sort of walk us through how you applied for the competition, like how you knew about the challenge and how much time you spent into making the app? Yeah.
Yes, of course. Okay, so let me give some backstory. So when I was little, I always loved writing. Like that was sort of like my creative passion. I wrote all the time. And when I was in 10th grade, before that, I never knew that I could be able to get into computer science because I was always told growing up that like girls weren't really allowed to do computer science, which is very traditional. But I sort of wanted to break that stereotype in 10th grade. I decided to take computer science, which is fun experience. I took AB Computer Science Principles, which is a class that's offered at a lot of American schools. And in that class, we actually didn't really do as much coding as I expected to. I wanted to build like applications that actually had an impact on the world, but we mainly just learned like kind of block code and the basics of like the internet and everything. So I decided to sort of take time outside of school to teach myself a few new different languages. So I learned like Python, which is used for a lot of like machine learning and AI applications, which is what I use it for nowadays, and Swift, which is what you use to build like iOS apps, which is what I ended up building Vast with, and a couple of other languages that I was just tinkering around with. So the reason why I wanted to build Vast, which for context is basically an application that uses AI to help blind and visually impaired youth tell stories with their voice, is because as a writer myself, I found it really heartbreaking that a lot of traditional writing like formats like typing or handwriting didn't make it really accessible for younger kids to write their own stories and then publish it. And so I wanted to use technology as a way to connect writing and computer science and make writing more accessible. In terms of like how much time I spent on it, I think I was working on it like every day after school. It was tough because usually when you build more like advanced apps, there's a team behind it. But this was like the first application that I had built, and I didn't really know a lot of people who were doing similar things at the time. So I was very in the dark. It was a crazy learning experience. I had so many bugs. I think the worst bug that I had probably took me like 3 months to figure out. Embarrassing to say, but it was interesting to learn from. And the app experience doesn't only like incorporate the actual code, you also need to learn a lot of UI UX design, which is also the reason why I got into design, which is a huge part of what I do now, I think. But I use this software called Figma, which is what a lot of graphic designers use to create app interfaces, website layouts, things like that. And I think I taught myself how to use that over winter break, like simultaneously while I was coding the app. So everything kind of flowed together well. It took me a while to like develop a workflow of like building everything out and then wireframing, prototyping, testing, all the different stages. But yeah, and then the actual competition is called the Congressional App Challenge. It's basically a competition that the US Congress hosts for students in the states. And basically each state has like a representative where you can submit, well, each state has multiple representatives, but you can submit to your representatives like section of the Congressional App Challenge. And you basically have to film a little video pitching it, like pitching your process, how you built it, everything like that. That was a fun experience too, because I found that for a lot of competitions I have to film like videos and edit it and stuff. And so over time, I kind of develop more of a sense of style and like how I want to communicate the story and like the personality behind what I built and everything. So that was a really cool part of it as well. And then over the summer, over winter break, when I was in my junior year, like literally in the middle of finals week, I found out that I won. And then in the summer, my family and I took a trip there to visit, and it was really cool to like see it displayed and everything.
Wow. That's so cool. I actually saw the video you mentioned, like the pitch video for your app. And I really want to ask a follow-up question because, it was just so professional. It's like one of those YouTube video that you just watch is like instructional, all of that, and informative. So I guess did you make the video and how did you make it? Like what software did you use? Yeah, it was really cool. And I can attach this to the podcast because I'm on it right now. It's so cool.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I make all of my videos on Adobe Premiere Pro. And I never had like professional training in film. I think I have friends who do film, and one of my friends does a lot of cool like documentary filming and things like that. And so she taught me a lot of the basics of like how to use Premiere Pro and everything, because it kind of is like really overwhelming when you start. But I just found like for all the app demos and like effects that I wanted to do, I can't just really use like iMovie. And so I took a few days, learn it, figured it out. I pulled like 2 all-nighters in a row to submit that video, skipped a day of school. I don't really condone that, but I was not going to be able to finish it. And so I think I submitted it like 5 minutes before the deadline, which I tend to do a lot. It seems to be a trend in a lot of the competitions that I do. But yeah, it took a long time to edit, but I had some previous experience from past videos that I had to make, like for the World Series of Innovation. I had to make a video for that. And I think making a good video is a huge part of making the work you seem like legitimate. And so like developing that skill, as well as developing the skill of designing and just like finding a way to make what the work you do look professional, is especially as like a high schooler or as like a teenager, is really going to be a leg up from other people who are submitting to the same competitions.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So I guess you sort of touched on time management for most of your answers. So I just want to follow up to that because, you do a lot of competitions. You won first place in Tiger Case competition. And I just figured out like you won, I don't know what it's called, but something with the New York Times. Like your article was just there. Cool. So how do you manage your time with especially like balancing school, SAT, like all the other stuff that you need to do and your responsibilities as a high school student?
That's a good question. Do I really manage my time is probably what I really need to figure out, because I think like time management is definitely something that has challenged me for like the past 4 years with everything that I do, because sometimes like, and my parents will tell you this, like I don't always know when to stop. I like to have a lot of things on my plate at once. And like that doesn't always make for good mental health stuff, because I think last year, junior year, was probably like the hardest year for me in terms of high school. I got like maybe an average of 2 hours of sleep per night. I was like going to sleep at 2 a.m. and then waking up at 4 a.m. to like continue finishing out all my homework and stuff, which I do not recommend to anybody. Like that is really, really bad, because then you end up falling asleep in class the next day. So I think like that was the starting point. That was what I was doing when I had like too many things on my plate. But I think like this year, I got a lot better at organization and making sure that I'm not over promising on anything. I'm still doing like a lot of stuff just because I think that's what keeps me motivated, and like that's what keeps me like excited to work, I guess. But I think I really figured out a better system of planning out my week and planning out how to like get things done efficiently. So for me, I use like calendar. I use Notion, which is really, really good for organization. It's basically the software that I like to call it like my second brain, because I do everything on there. I take notes on there from like all the lectures and seminars and like media that I consume. I have my school like work to do, like calendar on there. I have like when I was doing college applications, I planned everything on there. So I would recommend like searching up a couple of YouTube videos to see how to organize that. It's like literally a second part of my life. Just everything is organized on there. And I think like having a good organization system that is unique to you is really, really important. It doesn't really make sense to like buy some like pre-structured planner or like use or use someone else's like calendar system basically, because that might not necessarily be what works for you. That's what I found. So like I sort of developed my own system of planning out my week and making sure that everything that I have scheduled makes sense and like fits in efficiently, and that I'm using my time properly. Like I, instead of like coming home and then spending like 2 hours like relaxing or like unwinding or whatever, I like to like, yeah, like give myself a 30-minute break, but then also like get back at work so I'm not staying up all night. And like that's just stuff that you figure out along the way, I think. But yeah, definitely do not recommend what I was doing last year. It's very, very unhealthy. And I like definitely feel the effects of it after doing it for a long time. But yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's I think that's actually very useful, because at the end of the day, it's true that all of us procrastinates and everyone needs a better time management system. So I guess I want to jump into this year, like your senior year. Of course, it's like a super busy year. On top of that, you have college application. I sort of want to ask, like, how did you approach the college application process? Like, how did you choose to go for Stanford at first, for early? And yeah, I guess also what do you think made you stand out on the application for Stanford that got you in?
Okay, that's a good question. So I would say that like planning for the college application process started kind of early for me. So some backstory, when I was in 8th grade, I applied to some like the boarding schools in the US, which are supposedly like the top schools in the country. Really have like a lot of educational resources that help kids get into good schools. I did end up going to a boarding school for my freshman year for 9th grade. And that was a cool experience because I got to meet like a lot of international kids and everything. And then in like 2020, I don't know if you've heard of something called like the pandemic that kind of impacted the world. And so because of that, I decided to move back home and then go to the day school that is near me. And I think throughout all this time, I was already starting to think about like college and what I wanted to do, just because I come from an immigrant family and I grew up kind of with like the American dream. Like I wanted to make my parents and like my relatives proud. So I knew that I was going to have to like do my best in school and get to potentially a good university. And so I like did a lot of research, like resources online of like how previous kids got into top schools, like what they recommend, what they think made them stand out. And over and over again, everybody talks about something called a spike. And like if you've watched like a ton of college videos, you probably heard like colleges want like a well-rounded class, but not well-rounded kids. So they want spiked kids. But I think what I realized is like I don't really love the word spike because it suggests that you can only do one thing and you can only be good at one thing, which I thought was really restricting because I was always like a very interdisciplinary person. I like doing like computer science and like business, but I also like doing like design and creative writing. And so I think what I ended up doing for my application was I didn't necessarily have a spike, but I had a theme. And that theme is what I tried to carry out through my like extracurriculars and through my essays and through my awards and all of that. Like try to tell a story with your application almost, because admissions officers are reading so many applications and most of them have like very similar extracurriculars. Like some pretty common ones off the top of my head that I just see a lot are like National Honor Society or like volunteering or like debate and Mod UN, which are all really, really cool activities, but just find a way to make it yours. Like find a way to kind of attach your story and your experience behind it. Otherwise, it's just going to look like an extracurricular on paper. And so like what I did for that was I kind of took an unconventional approach where I did very much extracurriculars that weren't really pitched to you at school. So I didn't have like any clubs on my application, even though I did do clubs and I did enjoy doing them. And I didn't put any sports, even though I did do varsity sports and I like did dabble in like stuff like that, but I didn't put it on my application because I wanted to like tell my story more directly, I think. And so my theme was basically dichotomy. It was combining like things that are contrasting. So my common essay talked about how I am like both Chinese and Chinese and American, both like a writer, but also a computer science programmer, and like both a startup founder, but both also a designer. And so I kind of played with this like contrast dichotomy thing. And I think that might have helped me stand out a little bit because Stanford really stresses like being interdisciplinary on like their website and everything. So that was like the way I kind of pitched myself. And my common app essay kind of wove that together through like the word Sino-futurism, which is basically a combination of like Chinese American like heritage and culture with science fiction. And so it's very much like an interdisciplinary sort of word. It's not really a real word. I think I read it in like a book once and I was like, that's a cool word. But I ended up using it for my essay. So that worked out. But basically like all the things that I just mentioned, I wove that into my extracurriculars as well. So I had like computer science extracurriculars also woven into writing extracurriculars. So you saw that with my app. And then I had like business also woven into design, sort of like weaving together contrasts, I think was kind of my theme. And then I told the story of that through my Common App essay and through some of my other essays as well. So I would say I think like that might be what I guess made me stand out. Obviously, I don't know as of now because I haven't viewed my admissions file yet, which I plan to because I'm very curious. But yeah, so this is all like speculation. And I think like making yourself stand out by like telling your story and like making what makes you unique like more emphasized in your application is really important. So yeah, that's just off the top of my head my answer to your question.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that I think it's a really cool like the way you sort of defined the spike, because of course I went to like a lot of webinars that talk about spike, well-rounded, and I never really thought of it the way you did. So I guess you talked about contrast in your application. I want to follow up to that because I'm really wondering, what major did you apply for, or did you say undecided? Because you're in so many different fields all at once. Yeah.
Okay, so for Stanford, they don't have you pick a major, like you don't apply for a major, you apply with like 3 academic interests. So I think I put down product design, creative writing, and science, technology, and society. But I think like what I'm gonna end up majoring in is Stanford has this really cool program where they let you design your own engineering major. And so I think I want to like do something at the intersection of like computer science, product design, and maybe like business, which Stanford calls like management science and engineering. So yeah, and then probably with like a minor in creative writing because I do want to publish more of my work, and I would love to continue doing that just as like a creative side hobby, but we'll see how that turns out.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So I guess I really want to ask, you mentioned you sort of self-taught yourself for computer science. Is that how you like sort of approached creative writing and also business? Because to get onto the top of like Tiger Case competition, it's really hard, especially standing out among like 4K fellow applicants. So yeah, how did you approach those competitions, and what were your strategies? Like, did you start learning? And yeah.
Okay, so I definitely like most of my skills that I apply to like competitions and everything to do outside of school is everything that I sort of picked up and like taught myself online, because I think like a lot of education systems teach you very general but at the same time in-depth subjects. And what I mean by that is like general in the sense they are very academic and don't really apply to a lot of the things that we do in real life right now. Like I'm taking multivariable calculus right now, and I've like never really had to use that in a lot of stuff I do, except some machine learning stuff. Like I see it, I can make the connections, but it doesn't necessarily like help me that much in a lot of the things I do. So I just find like a lot of the things that we learn at school haven't helped me as much in competitions and my work. And so all of like the applicable skills that I have I kind of picked up over time. And I think part of that comes with like picking extracurriculars that you really do enjoy. Like everything that I've done for college, or everything that I've done was not for college. Like I would do the exact same thing if I was not applying to college. And I think like getting into a good college is like good validation for the work that you've done. But with the stuff that I'm doing now is very much just for myself and for my career, and not at all for college. So I think like the skills that you pick up, like UI UX design and like coding and like being able to do research for the Tiger Global Case Competition, like being able to do like financial projections and like putting together a good slide deck, like that kind of thing. Those are all like hard skills that you can learn by yourself, like on the internet. Like we have so many resources right now. Like if you think about it, like 10 years ago, the kids our age, they do not have the same resources at all as what we have today. So like it's really, if you find something that you really love, it's really easy to just like find some courses online or like some guides or like people who are building it on YouTube and follow that and almost like make a curriculum for yourself that way, I guess. And if you really love it, it doesn't really seem like work at all, because a lot of times like when you're at school, like homework stuff, like all that, like, oh, like I don't really want to do it, it seems like hard work. But I think like when you are trying to build a project that you really love and like you're putting your heart and soul into that work, like it doesn't really feel like work. Which is something that I just found, like you kind of get into the flow of things when you're learning, or like when I'm designing, I kind of get into the flow of things. Like I can pull all-nighters without realizing it at this point. So I think like take advantage of the resources online and on the internet, and you can create some pretty cool things that school never would have imagined you were able to build.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's great advice. Thank you, Tina. And I guess to end the interview, I want to ask, I ask this to every Super Talk Show guest, is there any tips or advice that you would give to our high school super audience about like either college application or simply, as you mentioned, just pursuing their dreams, pursuing the field that they want to study and they want to work in? So do you have any advice for us?
Yeah, so I think, I'm sure like all of your listeners are all really ambitious kids. And I think my advice for them would probably be to like find like your North Star, like find what motivates you, and like keep that in mind as you go through the work that you do, because a lot of times it does seem really, really hard. Like for me, an example would be like junior year finals week was literally so hard because I knew that I had to keep up my grades while juggling like a ton of stuff that I was doing on the side. And like in times like those, it like it might feel like you want to quit, but if you have like that North Star and like what motivates you and like your own values, then it's harder for you to quit, because you know that you're doing this, whether it's like for yourself, what to make your parents proud, or to like prove to yourself that you can do something. Like having those values really gets you through a lot of the obstacles that are thrown your way, I guess. And I think another example of that in my case was like building the app, like so many bugs came up. And like at months at a time, I was like, okay, maybe I should just stop doing this. But also like you've come so far and like you've done so much already that like might as well see it through and see what you could do with it. And also like don't be afraid to be ambitious, because I think a lot of times like society tells you that you don't need to do a lot of stuff at this point, and like why are you doing this, like you should just be, I don't know, like hanging out and like growing up. But I think that is so important, but striking balance is also really important, and like remembering that you want to accomplish a lot of things while also balancing and like enjoying your life is also really important. So yeah, that's my final words of advice, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you so much, Tina, for being on Super Talk Show. It was a pleasure to have you with us and hearing all the advice you gave. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
All right. Bye.